Hello and welcome to today's VisibleThread webinar. My name is Micheál McGrath. I'm the VP of Marketing here at VisibleThread. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time today to join us, and I hope you find this webinar impactful and insightful. Today's webinar is in two parts. So initially, we have an interview with Dina Aron from Moog. Dina is a contracts manager with over a decade of experience, and she's here to explain a little bit about her working life and her day-to-day role at Moog. Dina is a user of VT Docs, a product from VisibleThread. She's going to share some of her main use cases for the platform and speak with our VP of Customer Success, Kyle Peterson. So we're going to look at finding requirements, looking at comparisons in multiple documents, and finding themes at scale in large multiple documents. So Dina is going to show a little bit more about the impact of VisibleThread for her contracts team and her experience at Moog. The second part of today's discussion is a live Q&A. So we have a chat box on screen and a Q&A box. Feel free to input any questions that you may have. We'll come to all the questions at the end, and anything we can answer, we'll be following up with after. So without further ado, thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to pass you over to Dina and Kyle.
Okay, well, Dina, thanks so much for taking the time to meet today. So what we're going to talk about and what I'm excited to kind of learn about and discuss with you today is how you use VT Docs at Moog, but particularly in a contractual capacity. So we'll talk about a couple different use cases that you and your team are employing every day. We'll see those. I'll kind of weave a few questions throughout as we go, but just right off the bat, if you don't mind, who are you? What role do you play within Moog? What does your business unit within Moog do? And we'll dive in from there.
Sure. My name is Dina Aron, and I'm with Moog, and we are in the aftermarket section. So we're global sustainment, and I am a contracts manager overseeing the aftermarket side. So what we mostly do is anything that's in sustainment. We do have as well like an OE side. We do research and development. Mostly what I oversee though is the global sustainment side. So a lot of delivery orders coming through, a lot of long-term contracts coming through.
Perfect. And then maybe just for those who don't eat, sleep, and breathe it like we do, sustainment, would that be, spare parts, repair, overhaul, things like that?
Yes. So sustainment is anything post-production. So it's, the life of the program. So once the production part sunsets, it'll go into sustainment, and now they're just upkeeping the fleet that's already been established. So the repairs, the spares, and overhaul of parts too.
Excellent. That makes sense. So to your point, high volume, lots of documentation coming through. Excellent. So maybe before we dive into VisibleThread, Dina, just one more question for you. Just in general, when you're managing these contracts, these important sustainment efforts, maybe what parts of the process were and maybe still are manual, painful, things that maybe are crying out for automation? Do you have a couple of high-level examples of that?
Yeah, so one of the examples is that we have a BOA, which is a basic ordering agreement with the Navy. And with that, they'll give us spares orders. So they'll drop in orders for spares throughout the year, right? There's no forecast, there's no, just as they see the requirement coming through. What we have to do is take our BOA to the RFQ that they're doing or solicitation and compare it to see where the deltas are. So when you have a spares contract, and we're talking, multi-million-dollar contracts, they want a compliance matrix. They don't want simply to say, oh, these terms apply from the BOA. They like to go through and still run the effort of a compliance matrix. So with each, these solicitations could be anywhere between 50 to 100 pages. They want us to go line by line, paragraph by paragraph, and say whether we take an exception or we accept. So that, I would say, is a very manual process.
Excellent. And then maybe final question, then I'd love to see one of those matrices in action. I always like to kind of pivot around impact. So is it correct to say that until you generate that matrix, looking at what can we accept, what can't we, what do we have to take exception to, that essentially you can't start work, you can't start delivery until that process is done?
Absolutely. Like we can't quote it either, right? So our proposal wouldn't be ready until contracts does a terms and condition review and disseminates it to the other departments. So not only are we in a crunch time from the time we get the RFQ to get this populated, we now have to distribute it to the other departments to give their inputs in, and then sit there babysitting and trying to, like, let's go, let's get this moving. And sometimes we have anywhere between like 30 to 90-day turnaround times on these. So it's really not a lot of time when you're trying to gather information from 10 different departments.
Excellent. It's a team effort. We want to reduce that lag to the greatest extent possible. Excellent. You mentioned it first, so let's start there. You mentioned when you receive a solicitation, an RFQ, you want to generate one of these matrices, ideally faster than before. Why don't you walk us through an example of that, and just kind of as you go, just you could high-level summary of what you're doing, what we're seeing.
Sure. So going into VT Docs, this is, our home screen. And what I would do is I would go into the folder, and as you can see, what we've decided to do is we've done the folders by platform. RFQ designators, so individuals kind of know when I'm just running some compares and stuff like that, I tend to put it into my folder. But for the purpose of this, what we'll do is we'll go into our V22 repair LTC.
Okay.
So this would be our solicitation that we received, and we'll go into category shred. And I just updated the dictionary, so we'll go ahead and use the new dictionary.
Perfect.
So it'll be a little bit different.
And just while that refreshes, Dina, and we'll see it in just a moment, but what kind of search terms are in this dictionary that you're going to apply against this solicitation?
Sure. So this dictionary is based on all the FAR and DFAR clauses. So it will be searching for the designated FAR or DFAR clauses that, from a business level and more of a, just like kind of lessons learned, this is everything that we want to look at when we are doing this. So as new ones come up, we are going to keep our dictionary updated. But what we've done is as you can see, we've broken it down by department, who wants a seat at the table and that we really want their inputs, and designated that these FAR clauses are not just something that contracts needs to review. It's something that we do need inputs from the affected departments.
Awesome. And then just before you shred it, maybe just so people can help visualize it, if you take engineering, for instance, if you hit that plus sign, let's just expand engineering. You know this dictionary really well. For those that are a little less familiar, underneath this engineering umbrella, we are looking for these specific FAR and DFARS clauses. Right.
And so so this is for engineering. We got 9 FAR, DFAR hits. There's 12. So what we're going to do is we'll go through and look at them. The way that we've broken it down is, well, if you click on this, you can see where it is on the page and in the body. And the way that we've broken down the dictionaries, sorry. Nope, I got to check them all, right? Check all. So what we can do is we can go to engineering specifically and see where their clauses are. I shouldn't have checked it all. Just here. Okay. So these are where engineerings are, kind of hidden. And what we've done with our dictionary is we've provided guidance based on what legal has provided us and the departments on whether it's acceptable or to take exception. So whoever's reviewing it has a little bit more information. So if you hover over this, you'll see it's acceptable and the explanation of the clause so that the individual who's reviewing it kind of knows, and they can make the best judgment on whether it is truly acceptable or if they actually want to just be, notified of awareness that when this contract does happen, this is something that might include extra labor or a little bit attention to detail. Even if something is acceptable, what we've noticed is like if there's a report that needs to be generated or just, you have a 30-day time frame to submit something, you just want to be notified of it.
Exactly.
And keep that available.
So if you deselect engineering, let's shred to Excel and get into the output, but thank you. I think that's helpful for those a little less familiar with dictionaries.
All right, and then I just go based on the defaults that we have. They work well for us. So I'll go ahead and export that. All right, so this is what the shred would look like. And from here, what we do is we send it over to our proposal manager. So whether it's our proposal manager or our program manager, whoever is running the kickoff, they now have the shred to send it out to the subject matter experts per department and go ahead and chase down the responses. What we are going to be doing, so I will filter it just to show a little bit more, and I will do accounting. And I'm going to just click on the X's. That's where we got the hits. So this is where the hits were. These are the clauses. So now what accounting can do is they can go to the term description and see this one says review language to ensure applicability. So that is up to them. What we want to do is we're going to add a column at the end for comments, and we want them to acknowledge it. So we want initials, date, and acknowledgement. So if it's acceptable, just let us know. However, if there's an exception, we want them to provide us with the alternate language. We don't want to be responsible for that language. We want them to say it. So that is something that we're putting the onus on each department. It's new and we're getting a lot of feedback on that. So we're working through it. But what we did do is there's certain times where while this one applies to accounting, it might apply to multiple departments. So we have designated certain FAR clauses for, it could be contracts and engineering and program management, or something that contracts and program management has to be aware of. So the dictionary is built for everything that department wants to see, whether it overlaps or not.
Yeah, it's a great view, Dina. If I can ask just two things, just within column G there, if you wrap the text, you can see it, like you said, in kind of the formula bar. But for any of our kind of listeners who don't use these shreds every day, what I love about Dina's dictionary here is we're flagging progress payments 52232-16. We're seeing that accounting has to review it, X marks the spot, and then column G there, Dina and her team have very thoughtfully included that guidance in G. So we have this nice straight line. It's not just a find function. What is our kind of prescriptive stance? What do we need to do with it? And it won't make a decision for you, right, but it will tee up the reviewer to take action and say, yeah, you know what, if this isn't a fixed price order, this might not apply, but right, we can do it faster and more collaboratively.
Right.
Nice. Dina, if you don't mind, really nice example of accounting. Maybe just to be extra thorough, why don't we grab one other category here just to see kind of what's going on.
All right, let's see. Contracts has a ton, so we can always go to contracts just to kind of see what they're looking at.
Excellent. And this is also a good opportunity for the audience to see you can color code accordingly. This also helps us parse through all these clauses as well. But we get each FAR clause nice and neatly on its own line so they can be treated and dealt with individually.
So for, for contracts, we have the same thing. Every FAR clause that we have in here has some kind of term description. So for example, there's this one and it says review any alternate quality level requirement. So this is, for contracts to kind of go through and see. You'll see that this one has multiple, like this FAR clause has, not only does it have quality contracts, it has quality as well.
And that's important, and that's why I just love this dictionary so much, is we don't live in a simple black and white world where one team is always responsible for one clause. Yeah. The ability for dictionaries to be layered is also very powerful as well. Really nice. Dina, maybe one other question here, just to kind of put an exclamation point on this. We saw you generated this matrix in just kind of a couple of moments, in a dark world before this. How would you, you mentioned it was taking a long time. How would you create one of these matrices before this?
Very, very manually. Lots of cells and a lot of cutting and pasting. And to be honest, it was probably the one thing I would always dread. And
sure.
You would just sit there. It's almost like you want to sit there on just one evening and you're just like powering through it. But I mean, it could take you a good 3 full work days to sit there and making sure that you're formatting it correctly. And then not only that, but we always provided guidance. So we had a FAR and DFAR tool. It was an Excel tool, and we would have to take each FAR, DFAR, put it into the tool, copy and paste that over too. So it's not only using what's in the solicitation, it's also then providing that guidance. So it was a lot of work. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I would say 3 full days of just populating this.
And your time's better spent elsewhere. Now we can get right into the analysis. And I had to do something very similar when I was in a similar position, kind of pre-VT or just pre-automation in general. Really, really nice. So maybe let's do this, Dina. I think the only other thing I'll add here, and we'll pivot, is for those listening who are thinking, man, that's a pretty wild dictionary. How the heck do we get to that? Just know those dictionaries are customizable. What Dina's flagging isn't going to be the same for every single organization. But maybe, Dina, if you can just briefly speak to the ability to customize this dictionary and put it together to kind of get started, basically demystify it. It's not quite as daunting as it might appear at first glance. Would you agree?
I agree. I think the outputs that you can export your dictionary right away. So there is as you know, VT Docs does provide you with a very, with a great dictionary to start with. So that's kind of what we did. Is when we originally did it, we looked at the VT dictionary and then we kind of made it a lot meatier. That's what we were really looking for, was something super meaty. So these are where all your dictionaries are housed, and super easy. So I'll give a great example, small business advocate. So that's, that's who's doing our small business plan. She needs to be notified of any orders above a certain dollar threshold. Originally, we had this FAR clause at $750. So she's just like, no, it needs to be $700. So I'm like, no problem. So I went into edit real quick, changed it to $700. Save the edits, and now the dictionary is updated. So what we have been telling everybody in the departments is, if you see something and you want the alternate language and that's how you want to review it moving forward, let me know. It's really easy and fast to update. I can create another department if, say cost and pricing. Well, we did this. So cost and pricing was like, we're not finance. So everything you have for cost and pricing, some of the stuff needs to be moved over to finance. So we kind of broke it out, moved stuff around. Again, really easy. If I want to take this need to edit it again. If I want to take this FAR clause and I'm like, oh, that's not supposed to be small business, it's supposed to be HS, I can just drop it into EHS, and now it's in EHS.
Nice. Really, really good example here, Dina, and our best user groups have their own custom dictionaries.
Yep.
VisibleThread will get you started, but definitely take the time, make it your own, and there's lots of ways to do it, whether it's right here or in Excel and do a mass upload. You've done a bit of both.
Right.
Excellent. Dina, if I could, we've also spoken, and I know one of your users has kind of a famous story about, I think it was a warranty contradiction or discrepancy.
Yes.
Why don't you walk us through kind of document comparisons, revision control, making sure that agreed changes are really incorporated. Maybe if you could kind of tee up the context, and then let's see that doc compare feature. I think that'd be a natural next step.
Sure. So we had a situation on one of our newer, it's actually a new development. It was a really big award for us. And we quote a 12-month warranty, which I think is kind of standard in the industry. However, some of the primes want more. So what we negotiated, and the great thing about doc compare is like every iteration of a mod, you can just kind of compare and see were there any changes, were the changes that you requested made. So what she did is she was running a compare from the original to the latest negotiation, and she found the deltas that she found and that were highlighted were the number 18, the number 12 was changed to 18, but the word was kept at 12. So we're talking about 20 times within the document, and we're talking about a ton of pages, over 120 pages. So it was a quick identification, and it said like, oh, modified. And she was like, wow, like I might not have caught this. And so I think it was only in a couple places that it actually was 18 and the warranty was everywhere. So she's like, I could have easily just, gone ahead and missed it. Another example is we did a novation. We had a novation, which means we're transferring all the contracts from one of our companies to another. And we had to do a doc lookup, and we're talking 600 pages, and we had to identify everywhere that it said Moog and put it as Moog military aircraft. And we came on board after for VT docs, but you can look up, you can go to discovery, you can do dictionary search, you can put a word in and say highlight all the places. And while you could do control F on your keyboard and just do Moog, it's not going to capture it the same way as VT docs would capture it, because if there's a space before it or there's a word attached to it, it might not actually capture it. So it was just some things here and there that we're able to really utilize through the software that makes things a lot easier. Like there's probably harder ways that you could do it, but there's just more time consuming, and this is consistent, and it just really works really well for us.
Excellent. Both two killer stories there, Dina. Why don't let's see that dot comparison in action, and then because you mentioned it, let's maybe finish up with that discovery. I like that kind of Moog military aircraft search. If you have some revisions either in this folder or another that are just a nice dot compare example, I think it would help to see that, just like with the shred. Kind of just walk us through what you're doing as you go.
Sure. So for the dot compare, we're just gonna use these two shreds that were uploaded. One is a shred of our BOA, and one is a shred of the RFQ that we just looked at, the solicitation. So we're gonna go ahead and compare those. I'm gonna select both. Let's hit compare.
And this is a good example too of, whether you're looking for warranties in a Word doc or a PDF kind of contract T's and C's set, you can also do Excel spreadsheets, which is what Dina's doing right now. So regardless of document type, we can help call out those differences. And Excel is a great example where this is hard to do otherwise.
Right. And so, well, these are two different documents. A lot of the output is the same, so that we're going to ignore the top part. But what I like to do is just right off the bat, I like to go and take out, just go here, fit only. Okay, so we'll go down here. So this is a good example. This is modified. So this was our original wording, and then there's a little bit extra here. So this is where we want to make sure, looks like just spacing, so that's okay. But here we go here. So inspection and acceptance at origin, non-repair items, whereas it's not on here because this is a repair LTC. So things that we were looking for, there's a lot of, differences that were added. So we just want to make sure that when we're using the BOA, it applies to us and that we're taking exception to things on this side. This is our solicitation. So, this is instructions. This is instructions cost vouchers. We want to make sure that that's not impacting us and that is actually okay. Go down here and you're saying facilities, but over here it's quality assurance representative. So things you want to make sure that you're looking at, it looks like it's the same exact, header, but over here it doesn't address quality assurance representative. So maybe the BOA is wrong. So, it's going to teach you and kind of alert you a little bit that maybe the BOA needs updating because there are updates to the clauses.
For sure,
So,
especially if you're kind of ordering against it over a year or more. Really nice example here, Dina, and it's a great Excel compare feature, which I think more contracts teams should be using. Really, really nice. How would you have done this before? I've got my BOA. I have a solicitation issued against it. How are you doing that side-by-side kind of analysis, unless maybe you literally have the BOA up on one screen and the solicitation on the other? Just quick summary, how'd you do it before?
And that's exactly how we did it. We went line by line, and even if your compliance matrix is done. So some individuals would get a compliance matrix, go back to their BOA, and make sure that the BOA has the same verbiage, that what we're taking exception to. But you really could only do it with a compare, like PDF of this, and you're just going line by line, making sure that there's no additional words being added, and there's just no good product out there that can do it for you. Even the Adobe Compare does not compare, so that's what a lot of people were trying to use, and it was a failure. So you would just have to go line by line.
Excellent, and that's just a little soul destroying. If we can reduce that, I'm happy.
Oh yeah,
and I'm sure your colleagues are as well. Let's do this, Dina. I'd say, do you have? So this is a killer Excel compare example. Do you have a quick, maybe a Word doc or a PDF comparison, and then that way the audience will see both types?
Sure.
Perfect.
Okay, so there was the signed one and then the final.
Yeah, and I'm seeing 22 paragraphs change, so there is something different here. But this is also a good example of the audience too. Outside of spreadsheets, if you have two kind of documents themselves, we see this left to right orientation. And it can be just as powerful to know what hasn't changed, identical there, as opposed to what has. We can't always kind of assume. And we see in this case, I'm seeing some kind of signature blocks, maybe.
Yeah, so that's okay. But then we're seeing assignment.
Yeah,
right?
There you go.
So that's a big one. Like that was on the original, but then it was taken off. So that's good. That's good. And then signature blocks. So just as simple as that, and knowing that it was taken off. I mean, if you're looking at a document that has that many pages, to be able to identify, was that one thing taken off? I mean, you're looking at everything, right? You're not just looking for that one item. So it's been invaluable to us, to be honest. Like the time saving apart, just the accuracy of finding these deltas has been huge.
Excellent. And I do this myself when I'm doing NDAs, any kind of contracts for VisibleThread as well. Before I sign it, I do a quick comparison just to double check. And then this is a savable output. I'm curious, Dina, I like to kind of really emphasize this. I'm curious if you've done something similar at Moog. The time savings, the accuracy gains are awesome. But the other thing I like about this is a shareable, savable Excel file that's time and date stamped up there at kind of row 2. So this is an exhibit you can drop into SharePoint. You can send to a reviewer or a signer, for instance. Have you done anything like that at Moog?
So we're doing it one of two ways. So we are putting it part of our proposal package of what we're sending out. So on our SharePoint site, under your program or your RFQ, we are putting it there, and that's what the proposal manager or project manager is using to distribute. And then Teams actually has an approval button. It's like a little module, so it's an app, I should say. So we're using that. We're putting a link to the SharePoint in there, and then they're going in and approving it or taking exception through that. And then some people are using emails and then using the voting buttons saying, did you get it?
Sure.
But we're trying to, but we do use this as part of our package. Whether the customer is requesting it or not, every RFQ coming through gets a compliance matrix. So that way, when the PO does come through, we have something to compare it to.
Excellent. I always think that's important. Shareable exhibits that benefit colleagues beyond the user, as important as the user is in this case. Excellent. And then the other thing that I think is interesting is I think there's a lot of subcontract and supply chain implications here as well. If you're making a change to a supplier SOW, you can send that amended SOW, but also send this report along with it. I'm not trying to hide anything. This is what's changed to once again drive. We want our suppliers to be aware of those changes and a little more quickly. So I've seen this output used downstream just as much upstream.
Right.
Excellent. Dina, let's do this. If you have a few more minutes, let's just finish with, you mentioned the kind of the search use case. I'm looking for Moog. I'm looking for Moog military aircraft. Maybe let's finish with, if you have a folder with some documents that maybe you'd search for like Moog military aircraft, let's say maybe within Discovery.
Okay, so just use all of these.
Yeah, I want the audience just to see that you can search across more than one document, and ideally, more than 2. So I think 5 is a nice number. So when we go into Discovery, we can see, oh, I just searched across 5 docs at once. It could be 20.
Right. Okay, yeah, so we'll use this F15. So we're just going to go to Discovery. And then all of them are here. So these are some of, the more frequent words we're looking for. You can, obviously add or subtract. Moog is listed many times. So maybe I just want to find, where's Moog Military Aircraft LLC listed? And it's really only listed in this one document. So maybe that's something that we need to add to the other documents, which is the reality of what we're going to be facing soon, is that we're going to have to, take a lot of our terms and conditions and make sure everything's updated to Moog Military Aircraft as we go through this novation process.
Exactly. And you took the words out of my mouth. Any kind of novation situation process, great way to do it. Why don't we do this too, Dina? In this case, Moog was the top appearing theme because you guys are, of course, Moog. But let's just pretend Moog wasn't at the very top of the list. show the audience how you can actually search for Moog military aircraft directly if you want as well in that type to search.
Just right here.
Yeah. And so what Dina's doing here is she's telling Discovery across all 5 of these documents. If she had 25 documents in a folder, it would still apply. Show me where Moog military aircraft is appearing. So not only are we going to find for you, we're seeing those 2 distribution agreements there, we're also disqualifying. Any document that's grayed out, those first 3, it doesn't appear. So you're kind of narrowing the funnel or your to-do list, and then just as before, if Dina were to select those checkboxes, if you want to double check, hey, how is it appearing verbatim in the content, Dina can just pull that view over to the left a bit and we can see exactly where and how in that document the search term is appearing. Exactly. And so when I use that warranty example, warranty is a great example where I'm searching for warranty, but I want to kind of see that surrounding paragraph. What's the period? What's involved? Is it just repair and replace? Or do we have to go out and re-procure? This view is helpful.
For us, we use it for CAS coverage. Do we have the CAS coverage FAR clause in there? Is it exempt? You know, certain situations where we have, you know, compliance, government compliance asking us questions and saying, hey, is this FAR clause in your contracts? We can just put all of our contracts into one folder, search it across. Government property actually was a huge one. They're going through their audit and they wanted to see if we had any special disposition instructions. So what we did is we put in a bunch of our contracts in here, looked up disposition, made sure that the FAR clause was in there. There was no alternate language, and we were it was, you know, they had a sample size. They're like, can you look up these 10? I'm like, sure, no problem. Put them in here, look up the word disposition. There was no alternate language, so it was an easy ask.
That's a great, simple but powerful story, Dina. Let's maybe finish with that. Let's take a bit of a chance. Why don't we search across these documents for disposition? I'm hoping we get a hit, and then I'll tell you there's one more thing I want to have you do. But what I want the audience to see here too is it's not just a one-off. Dina searched for Moog military aircraft. You can layer it. Let's also search for disposition. So in this case, we have 2 hits. We've now included that in this view to the right. So if you're looking for Moog military aircraft, disposition, and government property, you can check, check, check. And then if you needed to share this, once again, with others, all Dina has to do is export this. I'm going to have you export content there, Dina. I'm going to have you split text by paragraph. And then let's go with only displayed rows. Dina is just going to export the paragraphs from these agreements where the terms appear. These first few tabs are blank because the first few documents didn't mention those search terms. So it's not an issue. Don't be alarmed. Those next documents here we see, instead of having someone control find, where you also, if there's multiple hits, you have to click enter, enter, enter.
Right.
And kind of jump back up and forth. It's all right here, collated for you.
And this is the hit that it found. It was other disposition when I put in disposition. So, you know, essentially what we could have done is we could have just said, government property wanted to know, or do you have any disposition terms outside of the FAR clause? Well, all we had to do, and if the answer was yes, they wanted to know what the paragraph says. We could have just copy and pasted this into their email and said, hey, here you guys go.
Love it. Here's the agreement, page 6. Here's the paragraph. It's just such a nice, simple example, Dina, that so many contracts teams are being asked to do every day.
Oh, yeah. I mean, their responses are due as soon as they ask us, right? So in order to do that on top of your regular workload and be able to address all these in just one shot, it's amazing.
Excellent. Well, let's do this, Dina. You're off the hook sharing your screen. Really excellent demo. Why don't we conclude just a couple of closing thoughts I'll certainly give you the last word, but can't thank you enough for walking us through your day-to-day life as a contracts professional at Moog. There's certainly a lot to do. There's a lot of manual tasks, but they're strategic. We need to be accurate. The stakes are high. And so I just think it was a great walkthrough of how you've thoughtfully employed automation to reduce some of those manual tasks, to drive accuracy, and also maybe something as simple as just improving morale. Copying and pasting into Excel is pretty tough. So anything else to add there in terms of impacts to your day-to-day, to your interactions with other colleagues and teams? Feel free to kind of go with that wherever you see fit.
Yeah, well, I just had a meeting with somebody on the OE side yesterday. It was supposed to be 45 minutes and it ended up being an hour and a half. She wanted to kind of see what does VT Docs do. She's seen all the demos. This was the first time she's actually had to use it. So I was showing her all the different ways. And I think the desire to learn and the desire to just improve processes and move forward, not backwards, is huge. So she was just so excited and she's like, this is great. I'm going to send it out to everybody. And it's just been such a big help. And I think for me I love just having templates and uniform processes and everything. So the fact that this output is going to be consistent across the board, it helps people, like, for example, in shipping, who don't need to be searching for things. They can just see it the same way that they always do. They know to just go to the shipping tab and or shipping column, filter it. They all look the same. It's just a lot easier, and the flow's there. And what we've seen and kind of heard is that as long as we produce a good output, they're happy with it. It's not something they're used to seeing. And we actually have some people say, like, we've never seen these flow downs. Like, you guys never do it before, So I think it's a lot easier for us to now flow down and really give the departments a seat at the table.
That's really well said, Dina, in terms of, like I said earlier, we want to make our users' lives like yours easier every day, but you're enhancing collaboration through these outputs. And consistency, it's a great word. Contracts, it's an inherently conservative function. Those search dictionaries, it's the same search every time with the same output. That's important, particularly if you're a new member of the team. Actually, building my search dictionary made me a better contracts manager and helped me learn more about the FAR.
Hello, thank you so much for that live presentation, Kyle and Dina. Kyle put a lot of work into working with Dina, trying to get those use cases and trying to show them in the right light so people could see them from their perspectives. I hope you enjoyed it. We are hoping to do a lot more content like this. We want to show real life use cases from organizations who are using the software. So we'd love to have your recommendations and feedback on that session. If you thought it was interesting, if you were able to connect with it. We do have a survey on the right-hand side of the screen. If you're willing to use it, we'd be delighted. But also drop them in the Q&A box or drop them in the attendee chat. We'll be watching. I am joined here live with Kyle. So Kyle's back and he's ready to answer some questions. And we've gotten some questions come in throughout the course of the interview, and we're going to dive straight in. So all good, Kyle?
Yeah, fired up, ready to go.
Very good, very good. Well, at the very beginning, and it was almost the first use case that Dina showed. She was going through dictionaries, and she was showing some of her use cases for dictionaries that were very specific to Moog and the contracts team. There's a question here in relation to what are other use cases for dictionaries, and even what's the basics in terms of how to create them? How do you start?
Sure. So it's a good question, and I always say my best user groups have multiple customized dictionaries. Dictionaries are very customizable. They're easy to put together. My recommendation, thinking about use cases and kind of creating those dictionaries, is really think about your current process. What kinds of documents, in this case, we'll focus on contractual documents. What kinds of contractual documents are you reviewing on a day-to-day basis? What are you doing with them? What are you looking for? What do you have to report on? What do you have to review? What do you have to redline? So start there. Look at existing processes, look at existing approval flows, look at existing playbooks. So when I put together my, in this case, FAR dictionary, I had an internal playbook already that said, you know, these FARs are mandatory flow downs. These require review. These maybe we can't or wouldn't comply with. So lean on your existing documentation, your existing playbooks. That's the best place to start when we think about the genesis of these dictionaries. So beyond, you know, FAR search dictionaries, I've seen really interesting NDA review kind of dictionaries. I've seen more commercial terminology. You know, we're looking for your warranties, your damages, termination clauses, even kind of state and governing law. I've seen search dictionaries that, you know, we're looking for Louisiana. We don't like state of Louisiana law. And my apologies if there's anyone here from the state of Louisiana. You know, we are looking for Delaware. We're looking for Maryland. We're looking for Texas, just for the sake of argument. And then finally, I've seen some really interesting compliance, kind of intellectual property ownership search dictionaries. What rights are our customers asking for? What rights can we or can't we or should we not offer customers? So looking for words like data rights, limited rights, unlimited rights, government purpose for those kind of in that engineering heavy space. So, you know, it's cliche to say the possibilities are endless, but whatever you're looking for within documentation and you're looking for words, phrases, or kind of numerical codes, those can go into a dictionary. Lean on your existing processes, playbooks, etc., to kind of start that. And you'd be amazed how quickly you can get a working dictionary put together. And then final note, my customer success team is also here. If you've started it and you hit a wall, let me and my team know. We're happy to jump on a call and work through it with you. I've done it multiple times. I love dictionaries. That was maybe long-winded. I'll pause there.
No, that was a great answer. And I think a lot of it is down to specific use cases. And there's a good question from Dale in the attendee chat. So keep those questions coming. Are there training videos that walk through specific use cases? In other words, what steps are normally followed for X use cases, such as responding to an RFP or an RFI? Immediately, Dale, I've shared the link to VT University. That's a walkthrough of the feature set of VisibleThread. You will see elements that Dina walked through and much, much more there in terms of how to use the functionality. But specific use cases, Kyle, how would you direct Dale in that scenario?
Yeah, I'm actually going to send 2 more links into the chat just while we're talking about it. And it's a great question. So we also have a product video page that I just dropped the link into the chat as well. And that has specific product videos about specific features. Some are going to be not related to contracts. Some are, be aware. That's a great place to start. And then finally, I actually, beyond kind of pure how-to, which is important, I really like our case studies and our testimonial pages as well, in terms of hearing from other user groups, how are we using it today, I think is a good use of time. So I'm dropping links in as well. I know we have at the very least one case study from a law firm there, and then finally take a look at some of our testimonials as well. So Dale, maybe finally, my favorite way to engage with users is to hear about some of these questions live, and we're happy to jump on a call. And if it's hey, I need to review this document, I need to perform this task, how can I use VisibleThread to do that? Those are my favorite types of questions, and I'll help you to the greatest extent possible. I might be able to say, yes, we can do that today, 100%. I might say we can get you halfway there. So we also want to do some live consulting as well. So maybe, you know what, maybe for good measure, I'll just drop my that as well. And I don't charge by the hour, I promise.
You should.
Yeah, it's a missed out revenue opportunity.
Absolutely. And we have another question from Joe Jones in the Q&A box. I think this relates to a specific part, Kyle, does the
Yes.
all review category sweep up everything? Do you want to explain that question and maybe try and answer it through?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm actually going to share my screen. I think that'll be the easiest way to address it and just refresh the group's memory.
Yeah.
So we should be seeing my VisibleThread screen. If not, please do shout.
Yeah,
so
good.
What Joe's asking about is one of the specific search term categories. So in this case, we see this FAR search dictionary is broken up into category. We see all review not applicable, accounting, contracts, etc. So underneath these categories, we are seeing specific FAR and DFARS clauses. So VisibleThread is looking for 215-1 here. It's placed in this all review category. So the question is does all review kind of encompass everything? In this case, no. All review is more of a functional call out. It's saying all of these teams, accounting, contracts, legal, finance, cost and pricing, everybody has to review these 321 FAR and DFARS clauses. And we see, if we were to open up contracts acceptable, those are going to be different FAR and DFARS clauses than these. So that should address that specific question. I'm going to take this one step further, though. We do, though, see all FARs, DFARS, and NASA supplement. This is maybe, I think, Joe, what you were thinking all review is doing. This is a broad net. And this is also the power of search dictionaries, because I hear from users, well, Kyle, what if I haven't classified every single FAR or DFARS clauses? What if a new one's released and I just don't have it in my dictionary? You can put in place what's called a wildcard. This is VisibleThread saying, you know what, I'm going to show you anything that begins with 52 dot followed by this numerical sequence. Show me anything beginning with 252 dot, 3 digits followed by those additional digits to get us into that DFARS statute. So this is a really great example of we want to cast a wide enough net to find every single clause while also grouping them together. So bottom line, search dictionaries are not mutually exclusive. You can drop FAR clauses in multiple categories. They don't just need to sit multiple category hits. So that should hopefully answer it. It's a really good question. And then final thing that I'm just generally I hear about, and I'll just also explain a bit, those categories that we see, those reflect an organization's context. Your context may be different, but it's just a great example of how you can leverage these dictionaries to group things. This is a great example of a searched function. I want contracts looking here, accounting looking here, government property looking here, everyone looking here. I've also seen really strong dictionaries where it's more action oriented. These are acceptable, these are flow downs, these require review. Do that too. And it goes back to what does your playbook look like? What does your process look like? So I'll pause there. Really strong dictionary questions. Keep them coming. So I have maybe another question, and as much as I like a dictionary, this is not necessarily a dictionary one, so I think it's a perfect one to go to next, Mihal. A question kind of around supply chain, subcontracts, flow downs. How are we seeing these use cases being pointed down into our supply base? I'm also really passionate about that as well. I want the group really thinking about that dot compare. So what I want the group thinking about, if you haven't done so already, is to the extent that you have subcontracts in place, you've got statements of work, BWSs in place with your vendors. The minute your prime customer makes a change to a requirement and it impacts one or more of your suppliers, think about when you send that amended SAL back to your supplier, send that dot compare report right along with it. I see multiple user groups doing that today. So you've basically got 2 attachments in your email. Here's the SAL, here's the dot compare report showing the prior and the most up-to-date version. And so it's a transparency play. We want to be really clear to our supply chain in terms of what we've changed. speeds up review, avoids error, avoids some misinterpretation. So doc compare is a great way to start and leverage this not only up to your primes, but also down to your supply chain. To the extent any organizations here have kind of, I'll say corporate supplier documentation on their website, most do, terms and conditions, quality requirements, certification type language. Those are usually reviewed annually and they are updated. Even internally, run those doc compares and save those reports kind of for an audit trail or revision history. We're tweaking and adjusting the actual parent language, but we're also saving this doc compare report every time we do it. I think it's easier to read and it's just quicker to put together than some poor contracts administrator having to kind of write out in Microsoft Word, this is exactly what we've changed on this date. A lot amongst you, hopefully you saw that in those doc compare reports, we actually do a time and date stamp. As a former contracts manager myself, I just love that little detail there.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's just one or two questions in the chat around the recording and slides, well, mainly recording in this regards. So everything will be packaged up and you should receive the recording tomorrow. So I just echo, if you feel like this piece of content is relevant to your team or maybe other teams that maybe aren't taking usage of VisibleThread right now, feel free to share it. If you have any questions in detail, we'd love it. We'd love to have as many questions as possible come in. So feel free to reply, or if you want to see your specific use cases in our environment or want a demo, we're more than happy to help. So that recording will be available to you tomorrow. Kyle, we really only got 4 minutes left, and there's a few outstanding items. But do you have any final words for the group, or do you want to summarize any final piece?
I would say, I'm not allowed to have favorite use cases, but we're seeing a lot of good momentum lately in the contracts and supply chain space. So for any existing contracts or supply chain users on the line, thanks for being a user. Keep it up. I'm hoping you learned something today that'll maybe expand your use more than what you're already doing. And then if there's anyone on the line today that you use VisibleThread, maybe you're from proposals, maybe you're from program management, engineering, etc. You've got contract colleagues who maybe aren't using it today. I'm hoping this is a good example of VisibleThread is very flexible. We don't just help contracts managers. We don't just help proposal managers. As much as we love helping individual teams, we can see added benefit here. So to the extent that you want to share this recording, share some output, or even just share my email. Say, hey, this guy's a recovering contracts manager that used VisibleThread in the space. How can it help us? We want to answer those questions. So maybe final thing, look for more, to Mihal's point, of this kind of style where we really want to get into the product, really get into a user showing this is how I use it today. I think it's a powerful output, or rather format. If you agree, great, we want to hear about it. If you don't agree, we want to hear about it too, to make sure that our content is always relevant and it's always actionable. Generally though, I err on the side of, I want people seeing the software in live action, as opposed to kind of going through some slides. So I'm hoping we hit the mark here. We want to hear about it one way or the other. I'll leave it there. And thank you all for your time. I know you're busy people.
Very good. Thank you, Kyle. And thanks to Dina as well for her initial work on the interview. That was a super use case. Dina is obviously a fan and almost a colleague of VisibleThread at this point. She's very, very active and working with us. But we hope to kind of even share some more use cases and kind of dig in a little bit deeper there as time goes on. Final words, if you like this webinar, we'd love your feedback. As I said before, the survey's on screen. We'd love to understand if you find this format beneficial. There is some really powerful and exciting updates coming from VisibleThread and some content that's coming really, really soon. We're about to launch another webinar next week that's in a very similar vein. It's another contract example. It goes deeper into other use cases, so keep an eye out for that. And we're sponsoring a webinar with AP&P in the coming month with Aetna, a CVS health company. They're going to speak about using our other product, VT Writer, and some use cases in regards AI and generative content. So that's really exciting. So keep an eye out for that too. all that content and today's webinar will be sent to you via email. So thank you for your time, and if you have any follow-up questions, we'd love to answer them. So thank you all. Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks, Dina.